Okay, welcome to the first of our alumni series, which is really exciting. A massive thank you to Catherine and Catalina, who have very courageously agreed to go first in the webinar series. And the whole point of the series really is to provide those who've left the course with an opportunity to present to other alumni, to current students, and to those who might be interested in the course, so you can share a little bit about what we do, but also to provide a platform for artist teachers to talk about what they've done since they left the course. And the idea is that really the format for that is entirely up to them. So it's whatever is useful for them. The idea behind this is that it's quite reciprocal. It isn't something that is just about us gaining for the course, although of course we get lots from this for people that are on the course, but it's so that it can be useful to them and to their practice too. So with that in mind, they've both devised a kind of an approach that is going to be useful for them too. Hence the fact that some of it is participatory and part of a research project. So that's quite exciting. Catherine's going to go first, and so Catherine graduated in 2018, and she's currently completing a PhD in fine art at Oxford Brookes, and she teaches in adult education, teaches adult learners in an FE college. And so without any further ado, I am going to pass over to Catherine.
Okay, hi everyone. Thank you very much for coming along on a Friday evening. Very appreciated. So I'll just share my screen. Okay. Can everyone see that okay? Yeah, great. Okay, brilliant. So obviously talking today about my artist teacher identity, also my identity as a practice researcher in fine art, and I find them very interwoven and very interconnected, extremely valuable the way they interact together. So I'm just going to move my little icons so I can see my text. Okay, so I'm going to talk about my research project in my PhD. I'm looking at liminal light, liminal space, and I'm looking at it through an art-based investigation. So I've been looking at liminality quite a long time now, and I have Rachel's thank for this. She is the person who put me onto liminality, which has been life-changing, I would say, in every aspect of my life. Really fascinating phenomenon. I started looking at it back in 2017 within my art practice on the MA education at Brookes. I used it as a vehicle for my dissertation topic. I've then started to investigate it through fine art methods in my PhD and MPhil at Oxford Brookes, due to complete that 2024. So I'm literally at a midpoint at the moment. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my research aims and objectives today, the processes I'm using and how it helps my teaching practice. I'm going to be also showcasing a participatory sound walk with an opportunity for you to create your own, hopefully, experience by walking simultaneously and listening to a binaural recording of a liminal place that I've recorded for you. So binaural recording, I don't know if people are familiar with that. It's a recording created through omnidirectional microphones to create a 360-degree surround sound audio experience. So you hear like you do in real life, which is really different to how most recordings are made. So you're going to hear sounds in front of you, behind you, above you, below you, to your right and to your left. And hopefully it'll help you to build a audible map of your physical terrain. Okay, so and then we'll conclude with a 10-minute question answer on your experiences during sound walk. So my research aim is looking at what ways can liminal phenomena be explored through arts-based practice. I've been looking at different sensory ways of creating interpretation of liminal light and space to decontextualize experience. So thinking about ways that the everyday can become non-normative, a little bit looking at autographic methods and how you make the familiar strange and the strange familiar. And then thinking about artwork that helps viewers look at that decontextualized experience to then create a psycho-physical state of liminality. I'm also looking at the concept of heteropias, which are a countersite to hegemony. Michel Foucault, a French philosopher, expanded the idea of heteropias, and he said they're very anti-status quo, very much about looking at the opposite of current power structures and dominant cultural ruling elite. He said they fracture the everyday, past and present blend and merge, and the future and present merge together as well. So it's a way of challenging the norm and established sort of wisdom. And he says heteropias are vital to human imagination as they empower resistance to authoritarianism. Okay, so thinking about liminality in the everyday through this creation of effective, immersive liminal art practice. So I'm just going to talk you through my definition of liminality. I know that part of the programme now, you look at liminality, don't you, within the arts, the MA in art, education. So my interpretation of liminality is as follows. Think about liminality and its original Latin root, limen meaning threshold. It's actually an anthropological term, looking at tribal rites of passage and cultural changes in African cultures. First of all, dated by the anthropologist Arnold van Giepen. It was taken on by the British anthropologist Victor Turner in 1967, and he saw it as very much more, how can we say, affecting the whole of humankind, that it's all about transformations in every aspect of life, so spatial, temporal, psychological, and cognitive. He argued that liminal experiences are completely axiomatic to the mind, or even built into our hardwired into our DNA. So he argued that liminality is literally all pervasive and everywhere. So liminality I find a fascinating concept because it oscillates in a really non-binary way. It doesn't deal with binary oppositions. It can be here and there, but nowhere all at the same time. So it's a really interesting phenomenon to sort of make sense of. So it causes anxiety and anguish, discomfort, and can be quite threatening. It's also incredibly creative, productive, and change and transformative. So it's very disruptive of the hegemonic and political, cultural, social, and educational norms. And it's always a precursor of change. So it's very much a phenomenon related to change. Victor Turner said it was a realm of pure possibility where original ideas are born. So for me, I see that as also incredibly important as an art teacher and practitioner, because obviously originality is also very much a major focus of our practice. It's very ambiguous, uncertain, and subjective, and it's really concerned with transitional, marginal life phases and life occurrences. I see it has extra urgency and relevance and agency now in the time of COVID, because I feel that the whole of life right now is very much governed by these liminal phases of uncertainty, the unknown. We oscillate between waves, literally waves of the virus, but also waves of the unknown of the next iteration. So I see it as having extra relevance right now. So my rationale for looking at liminality in my art teach practice, I'm arguing that learning is a transfer of knowledge and a revision of worldviews. I speculate the learning needs to be demanding, flexible, and multi-contextual for it to become fluid and more long-lived. I formulated a liminal learning experience on my maths and education. That was the topic of my dissertation, where I looked at effective, collaborative, evolutionary, and multi-level disciplinary alternatives to shape learning. So rather than thinking about an outcome-driven, very curriculum-based learning, which is a major model in education today, I started from the opposite end, thinking about what is the starting point, where is the openness and the possibilities of the unknown in the curriculum. So I set an open scene setting brief for my adult learners, who are my participants. I gave them a mix of structured, non-structured activities, and I let them know the criteria and the outcomes, but I didn't tell them how to get there. So created a bit like a maze or a puzzle. They had to solve, so they had to make their own solutions to creative challenges. They had to select their own media, they had to select their own processes. So it was very open-ended learning. So they had to engage in a lot of high-level cognitive thinking. They had to consider their problem solving. They had to consider collaborative group work. So, it was a really interesting project and created some really fascinating results. So, thinking about the sound walk itself, obviously, the sound walk was an exciting aspect of my research. I found that through extensive reading, I got very interested in psychogeography, and I also got very interested in urban exploring, which is all about sort of, I can say, marginalised liminal spaces. They'd often go to how we say, underground subways. They'd often go to places that were very much marginal in society. And one of the urban geographers I was reading about extensively, Bradley Garrett, has a blog, and he was interviewing another urban explorer and psychogeographer, and she commented she thought sound was the most affective of the senses. This made me think, what does liminality sound like? I've obviously been photographing a lot of liminal spaces like tunnels, subways, flyovers and piers for 2 years, but actually what is the sound of liminality? So that was a really tantalizing question that I thought I need to try and answer this. So that was really what got me thinking about binaural recording, this idea of recording in the round. And then I created a series of sound walks to see if this would create a psychophysical state of liminality in my audience. So next steps are printing my images onto dye bond, looking at Fouquet's motion of heteropias as mirror-like aspects. So this idea of a heteropia being like a mirror. So when you look into the mirror, at that moment, it seems utterly real, but simultaneously, when you look into a mirror, it's an utter distortion and a fictitious representation of yourself. So Fouquet speculated that was a really good analogy for how that heteropia operates. So really interested in that idea of using the reflective dye bond image as a substrate to print my photographs onto. Also considering layering photopolymer etchings, layering different liminal photographs to look at how the layering process could manifest the concept of the in-between, which obviously is a very liminal concept, these layerings and how that in-between could create that sense of liminality. Also continuing my soundscapes and sound walks, I'm also going to be engaging layering liminal field recordings together to hopefully create very ambiguous, disorientating, transformative audience encounters. So field recordings something I've got very, very interested in. Basically, they're recordings made not in the studio, they're recordings made purely in the natural environment, very much looking at everyday sounds that occur all around you. They may be natural, they may be man-made, but they're very much unfabricated. They're literally sounds as you find them in real life. So, with that in mind, going to now think about the sound walk itself. You're really welcome to go outside if you wish. I know it's quite dark now, so I deliberately planned it to be twilight, which obviously is a liminal time of day, neither dark nor light, and it's getting quite dark now. And then to literally take 10 minutes and 2 seconds, the sound walk itself. So you do need obviously headphones to get the binaural experience. Just regular headphones, you'll get that full 360 in the round experience. Also, you need your mobile phone, and I would recommend playing the recording on full volume to get the full binaural experience. If you don't feel like going outside, it doesn't feel appropriate or practical, feel free to stay inside. Recommend listening to it in the dark though, so it becomes much more immersive and it's far less distracting. If you're just sitting in a dark room, that would be great. You're really welcome to write comments in the chat about how you found the experience. That would be really, really helpful for me to hear your thoughts and reflections on that. Also, I know Rachel's got my email address up in the chat as well, so if you prefer to email me in private, that would be wonderful to hear your thoughts on it. That would be great to hear how it sort of affected you and what sort of recollections or experience you've had through the sound walk. And then we're going to have a 10-minute question and answer session after we've done the sound walk, well, some opportunity for you to give me any feedback you'd like about your experience. So thank you very much. Okay, great. Well, I hope, I've got Vanessa waiting. Is she back in the room? Vanessa?
I've just let her in.
Oh, okay, cool. Great. So, anyone want to volunteer any thoughts on that? I'm sure you found that quite strange, hopefully in a good way. Okay, that's really interesting.
I thought it was really interesting that you used music. Was that music in the area or was that added?
Yeah, that music actually existed in that space.
Right.
Yeah, so it was like found sound, if you see what I mean. So like very much an authentic field recording, as they were all sounds that I found in that specific location. Yeah.
And were they kind of put together, or were they? Because how do you do that? Because that's actually it was quite an interesting experience. And then when you heard the music, it actually changed it in a way.
Yeah, the music obviously feels more more fabricated, doesn't it, compared to the other sounds, which are obviously very organic and very randomized. Yeah, and I thought just really interested to see how you found that as a contrast between the music, which obviously is a more structured and more traditional way of hearing sound, and obviously the field sound, the field recording, which obviously is very randomized and very non-structured. Like Rachel mentioned, a bit like white noise, she sort of found it, which was a really interesting comment.
Yes, and yet there's quite a lot that you could recognize, but it was almost the randomness of people's conversation. At one point, I almost, because I was sitting in the dark, it's too cold to go out here in Scotland.
Yeah, that's what I thought lots of people might stay in. Yeah.
So I kind of almost had the sense of being someone who might be homeless, sitting in a corridor like that and actually experiencing that. That's kind of where I suddenly found myself, which really I found quite interesting.
Yeah, someone else actually also listened to some other of my recordings, also said exactly the same thing. Elicited feelings of like homelessness, like being
whether it's because of the associations that we have.
Yeah, really interesting. He said exactly the same thing, which is really interesting. Okay. Yeah, thank you. It's really helpful.
No problem.
Thank you.
Catherine, you've got some people with hands up. I don't know if you can see them. It's Irina first and then Ian.
Okay, perfect. So Irina, yes, if you'd like to.
Hi, thank you for sharing this recording. I mean, lots of people say that they found it quite peaceful. It made me think of ASMR. I don't know if you're into ASMR. It doesn't do anything to me for me at all. It's just like it doesn't relax me or anything. I find it quite so intrusive.
Sure.
And the recording itself, I think it gave me a similar feeling, because I actually felt a bit kind of unsettled, because it's the conversations that you hear around yourself every day when you're in town, when you're at work, and so on. But because they're recorded and you're focusing on them, I just found it kind of, you never notice them, but suddenly, they're right, you pay attention to them, and that makes them kind of sort of brings them to the forefront of your kind of attention, and it just kind of I find it a bit an unusual experience.
Yeah, okay, so you think a little bit uncomfortable, but not completely uncomfortable, but just a little bit uneasy. Yeah, okay, thank you, that's really interesting. Thank you. Ian, what are your thoughts?
It was really quite weird for me, because it really took me back to a place. Because I remember I had to, that sort of being aware, but hearing sounds, but being alone. I remember having to write a eulogy for my mother-in-law, and sitting quietly outside on my own, but just hearing the sounds of ordinariness going past. It was, quite weird, you just kind of took me back to that moment.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because again, other people that have listened to some other recordings said the same. They had like very powerful like memory triggers to past experiences, like you, quite intense emotional recollections, like things like I said that were quite pivotal moments, and he said the sound like completely activated that for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because the sounds aren't the same as obviously I heard on that particular day, but it just took me back to that moment.
Yeah, that's really similar to what they were saying. They said they're not the same sounds, but I think similar enough, like you say, to be like a trigger back to that time. Yeah, thank you. That's really interesting. Yeah,
really cool. Like it. Love it.
Yeah, thank you. Great. Vanessa. I can see Vanessa's hand.
Hiya, Catherine. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
It was a bit disorientating. I actually went out, and I think I've written it in the chat, but I think I might have lost it. I don't know. So at risk of repeating myself, I found it, I was walking and there were no people, there were only cars. And it was very funny being surrounded by the voices, because I knew they weren't there. And also, at one stage there came a sound of wind and almost rain, and I literally took my earphone out because I thought, has the weather just changed? I mean, it was a really still evening, and I had to check. And then at another stage, as the voices got louder, I thought someone was behind me, and again I had to turn around, so it was just a little unsettling. But I really enjoyed the music part as well. When that kind of came in the middle, it was otherworldly almost, and it kind of took it into another experience. So well done.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Oh, I'm really glad you went outside. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. It's a bit dark and cold.
It's
right
lovely
now,
evening. So. Lovely evening.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, Lynn, I think, yeah, Lynn.
I put my kind of feelings in the chat. So but just to add on that after what Vanessa said. So I went outside too and sat in my garden, and it just took me as if I was on a tube station. I just imagined I was on the Circle Line somewhere. I didn't have my kids, so there weren't noises that were familiar to me. But what was quite interesting was I live near Kidlington Airport. So as I was listening to the music and the sounds, an aeroplane went over and sort of broke the trance of being somewhere else and kind of captivated it to where I was in person. So that was quite a strange moment.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's really exciting you mentioned that, because I'm deliberately playing with the concept of the recorded sound, blending with the real and the randomization of the real sound, because I thought some people in the group, they'll be in rural locations, some people in the group will be in a city, some people in the group will be maybe in an apartment, might be quite difficult to get out. So I thought it'd be really interesting to see how that changes, like you say. So like the real sound and the recorded sound, like mixing for you, which, yeah, it's great. So I was really hoping it would. So thank you.
And I had earphones on, and I never wear them in public because I always feel so it was quite weird to have them, hearing all that noise. But I was in a safe setting of my garden. Anyway, it was great. I enjoyed that very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Some great comments. Thank you. Oh.
Catherine, I think it's 6:05. So I think we need to move on to Catalina, but that was a really interesting experience. Thank you so much for making this participatory and giving us all an experience of your PhD. And if anybody, so there's lots of stuff in the chat, and I'll let you have a copy of the chat comments. And if anybody wants to contact Catherine independently, her email address is in the chat as well, and I can post that in there again just so that everyone has access to that. That's her Brookes email address. So if anybody wants to contact Catherine independent of this session, if there's something private you'd rather relay and not say it in front of everybody, that's absolutely fine. But thank you, Catherine. That was fascinating, and it's, from my perspective, it's really interesting to see how your work has developed from the MA program, because there's, like you said, there's a direct relationship to your dissertation, and I can see how it's emerged from your dissertation but gone so much further than that. It's fantastic. It's really exciting. I can't wait to see how it develops further.
Great,
yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Well done. That was excellent. Okay, I am going to hand over to Catalina. So Catalina has, when did you graduate, Catalina? 2017?
2017.
Yeah, and Catalina has done so much since then and works across lots of different faces and with all sorts of different people in all sorts of different contexts, in art studios and in schools and early years settings and FE colleges and all sorts of stuff. So you've all had some information on both Catherine and Catalina, so you can do a bit of reading about them in your own time. So without much of ado, I will hand over.
Great. Thank you, everyone. I am now completely zoned out, but I will endeavor to refocus. Do I need to? Where am I? Yeah. Right. So I always like to begin my talks with a picture, a silly picture of me as a very old woman artist, because that's what we can hope for. And I'd like to, I posted in the part that I give about the focus of my talk, which is to contextualize my own education and how I teach and how it's related to my art, the artwork that I do. I wonder if I can get rid of all the, no, can't. All your faces are a bit distracting. Anyway.
You can minimize them, Catalina.
If there's a little, see my cursor, because I'm presenting.
Yeah, you should. Are they all down the side?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you go to the top bar, there are little icons, and if you click on the one on the far left, it should get rid of it for you.
Far left is mute.
Oh, maybe not then.
I'll just leave it. Okay. I'll just leave it. So I will start with my education right from the start. And this is something I never talk about. So I was born in Cali and in Colombia. And I went to Waldorf school or a Steiner school. It was probably the very first one in Latin America. What was important in that school was the way in which all subjects were taught without hierarchy for which ones were the most important. So we had sports and arts and sciences and social sciences, everything distributed throughout the week without, and everyone had to do it. There were no options out. Everyone had to learn how to do a shirt and how to do woodwork and how to do calculus, etc. And this was a very small school, small setting. They all knew us very personally, and we weren't graded with numbers. Our reports included like how our development was in 3 areas: our cognitive development, the physical development and how we expressed what we were learning, and emotional development. And that continued almost all the way through to secondary, to the end of secondary school, where there was a bit of blend with the normal curriculum, like the Colombian state curriculum. Then I went to art school in Bogota. And as you can see, it's a bit like the Bauhaus of the tropics. It's the National University, and I went to, that's the art department, which was built in 1937 or something. It was a strange experience to go to art school, although I felt that it really developed my identity as an artist. Some of that kind of follow-up, like personal follow-up of, I signed up for sculpture, and I always felt that that tutors weren't there when I needed them, and so I ended up in printmaking. So I did both printmaking and sculpture in the end. Then I left for New York, and I worked in a gallery, and I worked with an artist for about 3 years in their studio. And the pictures are very old, but that's the camera that they had. It's the only camera, the only Polaroid camera that was 40 by 80, produced 40 by 80 photographs, so the largest Polaroid camera. And then I had my children, moved to Paris, and I was just myself, just me and my kids, and that's the building where I used to live. I was learning the language. I was thrown there in completely different country with not much to do, except being a mother. Then I moved to Oxford and started teaching art in this children's school, but before I was just kind of gave up on childcare, so did spend a long time being a stay-at-home mother, and that was very strange. It was actually like I allowed myself that because the culture allows it. Nowhere else allows that, especially not France, not in Colombia. You're expected to go back straight away. So that was quite enriching. I then started teaching art clubs and craft clubs in the children's school because I saw that there was no provision. And it was just like the last thing that was thought of. And then I entered the MA. And this was the very first assignment that Rachel gave us of recording a journey. And this really kind of summarizes that point in time. It's a drawing, I'm cooking, and I'm charting mentally the journey of my partner coming back to relieve me. So I was frustrated, and I felt I was only an artist as if it was a dark secret. This is where we start with the MA. So the first work I started making was, we had just redone our kitchen, and it just seemed like the perfect place to use as a studio. And I started doing this domestic sabotage recipes, or using recipes, but making substitutions, making bread and rolling it all over the floor. Baking itself is something that I learned in the UK. Never done baking before, and I was very interested in the materiality of starch and dirt and fibers. So all these are kind of like experimentations I was doing on that first year. There was always some inclusions on what I felt, my uprootedness, and so on how you claim where you are, like the place where you stand. So that's why I did a lot of footsteps, and then layered those kind of baked recipes into these steps. And the clogs are just filled with my children's hair. Then during the exhibition we had on the first year, I brought all these kind of disgusting recipes gone wrong, and I asked the ones in my cohort to serve themselves as if there were a platter or a banquet. And these are and then I photographed them. So these are the versions they produced. So there's an element there of collaboration. Then I got a studio, and then all these foodstuffs started to mold away. And so I tried to move into photographing them and asking also for anecdotes related to food that had a really strong emotional content. And I was looking at Chinese paintings and adding the text on the spare part of the photograph. That's a shelf project. Then I was still continuing with this idea of the starch and the materiality of starch, and we were talking a lot about what cannot be expressed with words, and for me that's really powerful about art. And so I was working with bed sheets and starching them and making envelopes, which is just what surrounds words. It's the body of words. It's anachronistic. And I made all this piece there with the envelopes kind of blowing. Then I had, I've done quite a lot. I had to cull it, but I had my exhibition, my final year exhibition at Modern Rose Studios, and it kind of encapsulated like the MA research project, which was in a nutshell an epistemological framework for making meaningful art. And it involved questions, and the artworks were kind of formulations of those questions. How do you start making work? How do you make something from nothing? And at some point, I was wearing this ring. There's a few kind of rituals, like personal rituals. This ring, which I bought in a charity shop, which was absolutely ugly, plastic. It looked like a prosthetic. And so I wore it to signify I'm going to focus. I'm going to become the artist I need to be. And then this image on the right kind of appeared, which is the idea of focus, but it's this idea of focus, of focusing, but focusing matter, and focusing not in an optical way, but in a material way, and embodying this idea of focus. In it, there's something flowing. It's kind of related to the starch, to the gloopiness, to something that is unformed or undefined. And I was very interested in this idea of becoming. And then I made a series of paintings transforming this image into an icon, in the sense the icon, like a religious icon, connects other people to that idea. Then within the research project, I was and with each of the pieces, I was asking questions such as, how is meaning articulated? How do you develop an embodied visual language? How can a work be understood, and how can you control interpretation? And this was like even coming to terms with people's interpretations. It's like, no, I don't want them to think that is that. I really want to refine and restrict. And in a way, there was a big fight with understanding the role of interpretation and let them interpret. Okay, I'll give up. And but for me, interpreting, there's a cognitive role in the body, and the body not only makes the work but also can contextualize it. So that's very important in my work. This other part on how you can guide the audience's into the work, into approaching or understanding or giving a way in. And this is just a drawing, but it's kind of like a landing pad. It gives some certain measurements for a step, for kneeling and for reaching. And then that was the end of the MA, and I continued making work, kind of following the work into loose ends. I always recycle the work and take it elsewhere. And this was related to time measuring, etc. And then most significantly, in 2018, I really focused on this project. And it was about what do I value and what I want to share. And I came up with this device kind of related with this same idea of the onset, but it is about what do I value in artistic practice, and can it actually be shared? What I value is the dialogue, that like that iterative dialogue with materials, with the external world, and how it comes back all into you, and it continues. It's a cycle. And so this, again, kind of anachronistic telephone shape, where the actual piece is immaterial. So the object only surrounds and gives the possibility of evidencing that channel. So I made a first solo exhibition at Model and Rose Studios, where I really explored participation and handling. So on some of the objects were placed on shelves that were made with desks from chairs, like from a school. And the audience was invited to pick the objects up. And I started using color to get people to approach. And there were all sorts of different ways of participation. One of them, which was consumption through the idea of selling merchandise, which I didn't, but I kind of made a mock shop. And also I did a piece, I called it from the slides because it was too long, which was about a discussion about what do people expect. It was a kind of panel discussion where I asked questions to visitors about what do they expect to see what do they expect when they come to art exhibitions. And then I made coffee in this kind of sculptural coffee filter, and then I distributed and we all drank coffee. And so at least I could really get into them in some way, into their bodies, if they could take nothing else. Then the current project I'm working on is about a more internal, what happens on the inside, and I'm tentatively calling it a meaning-making apparatus, and I've given myself like the next 2 years to work towards it. This is my year of teaching, so I'm not doing too much. I'm slowly working on it, towards it, but I'm maybe next year I'll apply for Arts Council funding to develop this project, because I need a lot of technical skills to develop it. And I did a residency just at the end of last year, where I did this piece, which is a video performance and a printed score. So I had to move studios, so I didn't have materials or tools, and I was at home. It was like a mini lockdown. And so I decided to do performance. It turns out that it's not that strange. even though I don't like to perform, teaching is almost a bit like performing in itself. And I wanted to evidence all the practice of making without actually making. So I'm performing with my hands as if I was making something, but actually I'm making myself at the same time. So I call this, it has several, I have 7 options of titles, and they will be ranked by a survey of the audience. So they, every time it's shown, it will have a different title. And the video performance goes alongside with a script or a printed score, which I worked alongside at the same time as I was doing the performance, and which people can take. So it is also that idea of sharing, of remaking, and allowing others to have a go. And as I do this, I continue to teach little children, primary school children, college, further education, college students, and adult experimental drawing. And in all of them, I try to include a sense of touch. And that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone.
What a lovely photo. Oh my goodness. Was that from Catalina? When was that from? Was that when we did the
Beyond Surface? And I also, yeah, and all these pictures of artist teachers was when we were doing the We Are Artist Teachers. And so there's some of you missing from there, but I've met repeatedly through the years. I've met so many of you, and it really is, it's great to have the community. Yeah.
Oh, that makes me feel quite poignant. That's quite overwhelming. It's lovely. Thank you, Catalina. I'm sure that there is a lot in that people will be able to relate to, and a lot that they will be able to respond to as well. Let's open it up for questions. If you want to put your hand up electronically, and Catalina can come to you as you pop your hand up, or you can pop a question in the chat if you prefer. Any questions? Or just on me. Oh, there we go. Irina.
Hi, thank you for sharing this. Going back to what you said about being a kind of a secret artist for at some point in your life, did you find that you have to kind of justify your practice to other people? You know, because it's not really something that, as you said, something you almost had to practice in secret or not talk about so much. And if you did have to kind of explain to your, I don't know, your extended family or someone else about, you know, what your practice is, how did you do that?
I don't think I have to explain it, and sometimes it gets joked about it being my hobby, but it's not. It's definitely during the whole investigation of the MA, at the end of the MA, sparked like an ongoing discussion at home about can art be research, and does it have an equal standing? Does it produce the same type of knowledge? And this was ongoing. It was a battle, and we haven't had that discussion anymore. I think it was proven. And I don't have to justify it anymore. We won.
Well done.
I mean, with and it's funny because it's and I was talking to my dad about this, about teaching in FE and how how the students feel like they failed. And my dad asked me, "Oh, do you ask your partner about to give you tips?" I mean, because he teaches at the Oxford University. And I said, well, he teaches the opposite spectrum of students, the ones that have done everything right, who got there and it's a completely different experience, but not less valid.
One would argue that it's, I mean, yes, absolutely of equal standing, but it's unbelievably important to work with those who don't have that privilege, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Vanessa.
Catalina, and you kind of, I was going to say, and that it just seems that whatever situation you're in, you make art. You lose a studio, so you adapt your art to fit it. And then it was interesting just to hear you say just previously to, I think it was Zoe, that it was discussed in your house that art was your hobby. But it's not, it's so obvious that it is a way that you express yourself in so many different ways. And you're not just an artist who uses one thing, you use anything that comes to hand. Would you say, is that true? Would you say, I mean, what would happen if you damaged your hand and you couldn't make art?
I don't know, but during the residency that I was doing, it was an online residency, and everyone was defining, they had to do a presentation and define themselves, like what type of artist they are. And I just couldn't think what type of artist I am. It kind of made me reevaluate what am I multidisciplinary, or like, do I make sculpture, but I also make I work in textiles, and sometimes I work in metal, and sometimes I do all sorts. So actually it's like, no, I'm an artist. I do what it takes, whatever the project demands. And I'm keen to learn, right? If I need, for this project, for this current project that I'm going to work on, I need to learn how to do metal work. So this is one thing that I'm planning towards. And I'm just going to get my gloves on and put learn to do soldering.
And I think that's great, because I think some people just tend to stick to what they know and become an expert at it, because learning a different technique might take just more of a learning ability. And so I think it's a really brave approach.
Yeah, it's true, but at the same time, I like to do it, and now I don't really care too much if it looks shoddy. I'd rather make it than make it perfect.
And get the expression out there.
Yeah.
Well done. Very interesting presentation.
Thank you, Vanessa. Zoe.
I'm really pleased to hear you say that you use whatever it takes, because that's been my struggle, and it doesn't need to be a struggle. So it's really refreshing to hear that you just use a range of materials, because as Vanessa just said, people feel that they have to compartmentalize themselves in terms of saying, I'm a painter, I'm a photographer. And for some people, that's not the case. One thing is not enough. And I think it's not often that people will just relent and allow themselves to experience a range of media, which is it's lovely to see you doing that. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Now, for me, that's very important. And I think it's also related to being an artist teacher, because if you're curious, so often you're thrown like, oh, let's go, and on Tuesday I need to learn, I need to teach how to make Coptic bindings, so I need to watch all the YouTube and have a go, and then I'll present a mock-up and it's really bad, and who cares?
I mean, the nature of our job is multidisciplinary. We have to be really adaptable. So why would you then restrict yourself by saying that you only work with one type of media? I suppose that works for some people, but for other people, like yourself, that's not the case. But it's good to know that there are others out there.
Good, excellent. Laurie.
I just wanted to say I really enjoyed how kind of, especially with your baking and the way your experimental process, and that is just so, it's like you're playing, but you're also communicating. And it's really refreshing. Fantastic, love it. And I love the way you also share. I thought that's sometimes as teachers, we're also giving so much. It's quite nice, that sort of dialogue. So I really found that very interesting. Thank you.
Fantastic. Yes, when we make art, we make art to show it and to share it with others. And sometimes it feels presumptuous, like why does what I have to say matter, or why would anyone find it important, or how can I give them tools to understand? In part, teaching for me is so that people understand what it takes to make something. So they need to understand, so that when they come and see work, they understand what it took. So in a way, it's an artist strategy. Yes, Lynn.
Hi, Catalina. I really enjoyed your presentation. That was great. So thanks so much for sharing. What I really picked up on is how your work never finished. You turned it into something else, and you kind of layered it over and over. And I remember, because we worked together, I remember you said something to me about the students, just let them get all the bad sculptures out, get all the bad paintings out, because they need to do all that bad stuff so they can move on to the next. And I really kind of like, I've learned from you, because it's like, you need to get it out your system, don't you, so you can move it and turn it into something else and recycle it. So that was really interesting. I just wanted to pick up on that. So thanks so much.
Yeah, recycling is really, really a great strategy. And then it adds complexity, because you do lots of experiments and you kind of shelve them, and you think, oh, why did I do that? It's ugly. But then you can't bear to throw it, right, Lynn? And then you put two things together, or three things together, or later on it kind of resurfaces. Just keep doing it.
Folks, I think we need to draw this to a close. But I thank you so much, Catalina. And I would say that, some of the commonalities between yourself and Catherine's presentation are it comes back to curiosity. It's what you were talking about in terms of meaning making and curiosity, and how we generate knowledge through our engagement with making, whether that is making through sound, or whether that is making through materiality, physical properties, or whether it's through gesture, or whatever kind of structure or medium we choose to use. There's that kind of constant questioning and engagement with what happens if I do this, and how does that make other people feel, or how do other people respond? And I think that's what's endlessly fascinating about both of your projects. Thank you so much for agreeing to present today. It's been such a rich experience for me, from a purely selfish perspective, just to see how your work has developed so much, but equally to see so many people on the call, lots of alumni who have come along, which is just fabulous to see you all. Thank you so much for being here, and to all our current students, and also to those who are interested in the course. I hope this is, you know, I mean, I can imagine it might be slightly terrifying because you think, oh my God, this work is really resolved. It's really kind of sophisticated, and it is. You don't have to produce really hugely sophisticated work in your first year. So it's kind of shows you where you can end up, as opposed to what we expect you to do when you first come on the program. If any of the alumni who are here would like to be involved in the next one, just let me know, drop me a line, send me an email. We will be looking for 2 more people. So maybe in a month's time. So this time, you know, sometime towards Easter. So if you're interested, let me know. And it's a scary thing, but it might be, you know, if you want to use it as an opportunity to try and figure out where you want to go next. Yes, there you go. Zoe has already volunteered you, Irina. Yeah, maybe. Well, we can have a conversation behind the scenes about that. How about that? Okay, folks, I'm going to stop recording.